The foods that are high in sulfur are garlic, ginger, onions, brassica sprouts, and eggs, and one or more of those should be a staple in the diet, not a condiment. When we have garlic at home, we take a whole bulb of garlic per person, we roast it, and it comes out like custard. When we have ginger, there's enough ginger that you can still taste the ginger the next morning. So we suggest that people make staples out of what have become condiments, and frankly, make condiments out of some things that have been staples that promote ill health. So sulfur-rich foods, very important. Sulfur sources in the diet, very important. And yet today, most people are using up their detoxifying methylation critical factors faster than they're replenishing. So increasing sulfur sources in the diet and through supplementation, to me, is part of surviving the 21st century.
Welcome back. It's Mike Mutzel with HighIntensityHealth.com. Today we're live with Dr. Russell Jaffe, and we're going to talk all about detoxification, mitochondrial dysfunction, metallothionein, glutathione, the methylation cycle, and much more. So this show is sponsored by MethylationSummit.com. That's an educational event that I did with Dr. Ben Lynch, David Quigg, and Cheryl Burdett, and that registration for that is actually closing very soon. So you want to hop on over to check that out if you're very interested in learning more about methylation and how it interconnects to detoxification. So I want to introduce to you today our guest, Dr. Russell Jaffe. I'm very excited to have him on. I know we're going to have a lot of fun talking about all these different concepts, and he's an expert in this field of integrative clinical medicine and predictive biochemistry and much more. So let's talk about his background. Dr. Jaffe earned his MD and PhD from the Boston University School of Medicine back in 1972, and he completed his residency in clinical chemistry from the NIH. This was back in 1973, and he's also board certified in clinical pathology and chemical pathology as well. And for the past 30 plus years, he's been an advocate for the healthcare system that treats people, not diagnoses, and not consequences. So he's really about getting at the root cause of what's going on in ill health and so forth. So Dr. Jaffe, thank you so much for being here. I'm grateful to be with you today.
Thank you, Mike. A pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. I'm just honored and fired up to be with you. But before we dive into vitamin C, metallothionein, the methylation cycle, and so forth, I would love to know, like, what sort of life experiences transition you out of this very traditional medical training and academic training into more of a very progressive, functional, integrative medicine focus? Like, what sort of life experiences, what happened? Like, take us to that level.
Well, I think you can go back to my time as a student. When I was a medical student, we were instructed that we were going to take an oath, and that oath was going to put patients' welfare before our own. And some of us remember that, and some of us seem to be caught in a system that is less supportive of proactive and primary prevention. So I think with me, it goes back to my days as a student in Boston and then in Bethesda. And when I heard that meditation and mindfulness, or that acupuncture and Chinese medicine, or Ayurvedic medicine, or homeopathy, were valid medical arts, healing arts, I was sure this couldn't be the case. And the reason I was sure it couldn't be the case was because neither in Boston nor in Bethesda were there any folks studying any of those subjects, and we thought we were pretty smart. Right. And so I went as a skeptic, and found, to my pleasant amazement, that I was grossly ignorant about the mind and body connections. I was grossly ignorant about what you eat and drink and what you think and do and how that impacts the quality of your life, what we would now call the epigenetic component. So I went as a skeptic. I found people who had much more wisdom than I, and I was fortunate enough to first be their student, and then in many cases for them to become my patients. And so I had both the student-acolyte relationship with the source of wisdom, and then I had the more intimate and personal relationship with these people as my patients. So I came as a skeptic. I decided that what was lacking was good scientific, rigorous testing of some of these ideas. That you really are the product of what you eat and drink, think, and do, that we really can do outcome community-based studies looking at the effectiveness of these lifestyle approaches, which turn out to have great return on investment if you're from the financial point of view, and if you're just from the point of view of stable civil society, They reduce unnecessary suffering. They reduce unnecessary healthcare costs that right now are breaking most banks, most payor banks. And so I believe we are speeding a transition from the current system, which is based on sick care, to a new system that's based on healthful caring. And I'm privileged to stand on the shoulders of people who came before and hopefully point in the right direction so that the next generation can go farther than we did.
Mm-hmm. Love that approach. And you talk about focusing on a healthcare system that treats people, not diagnoses, and causes, not consequences. So, really important information there. And so,
Good words.
You hit on epigenetics, and I think that's something that's really hot right now. Everyone's talking about methylation and detox and glutathione production. So, maybe let's weave that discussion into the context of epigenetics and
Sure.
and some of these things. So, and
We used to talk about metabolism and biochemical individuality. Now, I think more correctly, we point out that epigenetics, your lifestyle, the habits you choose in regard to what you eat and drink, think, and do, are largely determinative. That is, they determine the 92% of your lifetime health that is not genetic. Yes, we've had the Human Genome Project, and it's done an awful lot of good science, but what it's really shown is that a very small fraction of most people's health is determined by their DNA and their genes. And most exciting is that the choice of your lifestyle largely determines the long-term cost and quality of your health. So I'm very excited that we can bridge the gap between personalized medicine, personalized healthcare, and evidence-based, if you will, epigenetic 21st century healthcare in ways that save so many lives and save so much in dollars and treasure that we can actually fund and speed the transition from sick care to healthful caring just based on stopping what today is a very costly way of, in total, burying an extra 1 million people a year at a cost of $8 trillion to the country. And I believe that unnecessary loss of both life and resources is something we can address and benefit from, where most people right now are terrified of the implications.
Thanks for diving into that incredible detail right there. Now, you hit on a lot of different things, Dr. Jaffe, from toxins to environmental stressors to sleep issues, nutritional status, and so forth. And I think, toxins are a really big one, and that kind of weaves into this discussion today when we talk about glutathione and so forth. But, toxins have these transgenerational effects, and they affect generations after individuals are exposed. Now,
They do. But let me jump in for a moment and point out that there's the external stressors. There's the external xenotoxins, environmental toxins. There's the external life challenge stresses. It's your internal adaptation that really determines the effect that these will have on you. So let me be very specific. Let's say you're concerned about toxic metals, and we should be concerned about lead and mercury and arsenic and nickel and cadmium and those toxic metals. If you have enough healthy metallothionein to be a sponge to take up and detoxify the toxic metals you're exposed to, then they don't stay in your body. On the other hand, if you have switched from elective protective mode, which is where I want you to be, into survival mode, where many people are, then your body says, oh, I can't devote the energy to anything that's elective and protective. We have to get through the immediate crisis. Mm-hmm. And I'm suggesting that too many people are living, in essence, on the edge of a health crisis. Too many people fall into that health crisis, and we really need to rethink the whole process so that we recognize the internal adaptation as well as the external challenges. The external challenges are very substantial, both psychosocial and xenotoxic. But it's your internal adaptation, whether you've got enough of the good stuff to neutralize the bad stuff, that really determines the effect on you. And I'm suggesting that we can all live longer, live better, with less resources consumed, less devoted to sickness care, by being proactive about primary prevention. And part of that is to recognize that we learn and can relearn how we adapt and respond to the challenges of daily living.
Mm-hmm. That's beautifully said right there, Dr. Jaffe. Now, you mentioned some words that I think people are familiar with, like glutathione and detoxification and toxins, but you hit on a word that I don't think too many people understand. That's metallothionein. So, do you want to talk about what that is and different ways nutritionally that we can upregulate metallothionein?
Metallothionein is a protein, and it's made up of two amino acids, the simple amino acid glycine and the sulfur-containing amino acid cysteine. And when the body produces that polypeptide, when it just has a sequence of glycine, cysteine, one after another, that's the perfect geometry to bind magnesium and zinc, the metals, magnesium and zinc, the minerals that are essential to life, magnesium and zinc. And so when you have metallothionein, you have this magnesium zinc rich protein that gives up its magnesium or zinc and takes on and irreversibly binds to it any of the toxic metals, like mercury or lead. And then these metallothioneins are excreted by the body through the sweat, through the stool, through the urine, and we get rid of the toxin. And you're right, even most colleagues, even most physicians are not aware that metallothionein is what stands between most of us and toxic metal intoxication. And you can measure metallothionein. It's in the saliva, it's in the urine, it's in the stool, it's in the sweat, it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it turns out it's so important that it's everywhere. And it's so important that when we switch from elective protective mode, where we have a natural protection from toxic metals, to survival mode, then the toxic metals begin to accumulate and all of the adverse consequences follow. Mm-hmm. The same thing is true for persisting pollutants and volatile chemicals. The same thing is even true with regard to the risk of exposure to radioisotopes or to other kinds of environmental pollutants. So the body has protective mechanisms, and when we're vital and energetic, these can adapt us so that we're not at risk for the exposures we get. And if you're living in the 21st century, you're going to have exposures, so get over it. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Yeah. And I believe if you have a diet rich in sulfur foods so that you can build metallothionein, and if you stay alkaline so that your body's efficient about its protein synthesis, and you have a balanced nutrient intake appropriate for your lifestyle, then you too will make, like I do, as much metallothionein as needed. And even though it's a new word, it's not a new molecule in nature, and it's very important to our long-term health and survival.
I love that. Great information right there. Now, you hit on something that I would love for you to expand upon, and that's the sulfur-containing foods and different dietary supplements. So where do we start first? Like, tell us how to begin.
Nutrition begins in the kitchen. It begins in the cooking pot. It begins with whole foods that you consume in as whole a form as possible. So we start with whole foods, and within that, I have a little acronym, a little set of letters to help as a memory reminder, and it's GGOBE, and that stands for garlic, ginger, onions, brassica sprouts, like broccoli sprouts, and eggs. So GGOBE is the memory hook acronym. The foods that are high in sulfur are garlic, ginger, onions, brassica sprouts, and eggs. And one or more of those should be a staple in the diet, not a condiment. Mm-hmm. When we have garlic at home, we take a whole bulb of garlic per person, we roast it, and it comes out like custard. When we have ginger, there's enough ginger that you can still taste the ginger the next morning. So we suggest that people make staples out of what have become condiments, and frankly make condiments out of some things that have been staples that promote ill health. Mm-hmm. So sulfur-rich foods, very important. Sulfur sources in the diet, very important. And yet today, most people are using up their detoxifying methylation critical factors faster than they're replenishing. Mm-hmm. So increasing sulfur sources in the diet and through supplementation, to me, is part of surviving the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. So I love all those foods, by the way, but I don't really do well with eggs, and I think a lot of people do have egg sensitivity. So what sort of options do we have for those individuals?
Notice I said one or more. You don't need all five.
Sure.
We have, as you know, developed the immune tolerance intolerance test, the lymphocyte response assay by ELISA Act. We do recommend that people eat what they can digest assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden. And in order to find out what the immune burden is, you very often have to interrogate the immune defense and repair system, the body's immune system, and that's a blood test where with 1 ounce of blood, we can now do 500 cell cultures very accurately, reproducibly, quite precisely. And from that, with the benefit of a health appraisal questionnaire, we can actually design a lifestyle program so that individuals or their health professionals can know how to make use of this information in the most evidence-based and current way. So yes, you want to eat the foods that you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden. And what I said is what I meant, that is you need 1 or more of those 5. But you're right, some people just don't like brassica sprouts or are allergic to them, or eggs, or ginger. So one way or the other, find out what it is that you can eat and drink without immune burden, and stay with those foods while you're strengthening your digestion, because eventually, if your digestion is strong enough, you break foods down to their building blocks, you assimilate those building blocks without immune burden, and you go back to being tolerant. But you have to do that in a comprehensive way, and that's what we've been doing for the last 3+ decades through ELISAC Biotechnologies.
Now, another food that comes to mind is whey protein. You know, it's rich in obviously leucine, the branched chain amino acids, but also cysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione. So what are your thoughts on whey protein?
Whey protein is high in cysteine, and if you can get native whey protein, it is easily digested and assimilated. However, most of the whey protein that is sold commercially has been badly beaten up. It's no longer native whey. It's a mixture of whey and casein, and casein turns out to be the immunogen for a lot of the people who have cow's milk intolerances or food allergies. And so if you can get native whey, the whey that's done with what's called counterflow technique, so that the protein is in a native form when you consume the meal that has it, the supplement that has it. So we do recommend native whey protein, the kind that has been separated from the immunogenic casein, and that is a valuable way of building glutathione. But having a protein that's been beaten up to the point where it no longer knows it was ever whey, it's been partially denatured, it's been partially oxidized, it's been partly solvent enriched. That's what most of the commercial whey products are, and we don't recommend.
That makes sense. Now, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I'm familiar with like whey concentrates, whey isolates, and so forth. Is this native whey protein, is that a whey isolate in a sense, or?
No. Isolates mean that you are trying to isolate the whey from everything else. And the problem is when you isolate it from everything else, it unfolds. So what you want is what's called native whey by counterflow technique. So basically, instead of forcing these molecules through tiny holes in membranes under high pressure, which damages them, which happens in the isolates, you gently push and pull, allowing the molecules to wiggle through in their native state. So what you want is a product that will proudly say, native whey by counterflow.
Great, that makes a lot of sense right there, Dr. Jaffe. So I think we've pretty much tackled metallothionein. We understand, how it's derived, why it's so important, why it's beneficial for our health and metabolism. And I'm a little bit cloudy in my head right now because I'm recognizing a lot of the same, raw material precursors that are involved in metallothionein production also make glutathione. So do you want to talk about some of the differences there and the importance?
Let's talk about that relationship.
So the segue, you're absolutely right, Mike. The segue from metallothionein to glutathione sounds like a big step, but it's not, because in both cases, the purpose of metallothionein, and to some extent the purpose of glutathione, is to protect you. So glutathione is a tripeptide. Glutathione is synthesized inside of cells. So when we give oral glutathione, we're giving something that has to be broken down in the digestive tract and then taken into the body and then made again into glutathione inside the cell. So if we give oral glutathione, we may help the gut and the mucosal barrier, but we're not feeding glutathione to cells. And I want to say that very clearly because there's a lot of misunderstanding that says if you give supplemental glutathione, you'll build the glutathione in the cell. and I'm telling you that that's only partially true. What really happens is the glutathione in the gut is broken down, the amino acids are assimilated, and they're synthesized inside the cell into glutathione. So the first point is that glutathione is a very important intermediary in keeping the oxidation reduction or oxidative stress low, because you don't want more oxidative stress than you need, and glutathione is helpful in that regard. However, glutathione is made inside of cells, and if we give the precursor amino acids, which we give, say, in those garlic, ginger, onions, brassica sprouts, and eggs foods, or supplements that contain cysteine, the reduced form of the sulfur amino acid, methionine, what balances out homocysteine as another sulfur-sourced amino acid. When we have enough of these sulfur sources from diet and supplementation, and when we have a healthy cell so that the mitochondria battery has a healthy proton gradient and the cell is alkaline because it has enough minerals, then we can make glutathione. Hooray! We can make the glutathione, and that glutathione can help shuttle electrons, protect from oxidative stress, and generally improve the functional efficiency of the cell.
So a question came to mind, you talked about mitochondrial function and its role in cellular health, which I think a lot of people, when they think of the mitochondria, they think more of like cellular energy production. So is cellular health and energy production the same? Are they different? Like, do you want to expand upon the mitochondria's role in cellular health?
Well, you're quite right. Most of us know that the mitochondria is this battery. We have this unusual so-called saprophytic relationship. That is, the cell protects the mitochondria, and the mitochondria gives the cell ATP. But what's important to know in addition is that the mitochondria also detoxifies, say, pesticides and hormone disruptors. And most of the persisting pollutants have to be detoxified inside the mitochondria. And so if the mitochondria get sludged up because environmental toxins are coming in faster than they can be metabolized to water-soluble and less toxic forms, then the whole machinery, the whole energetics of the cell slows down. Initially, it becomes sluggish. Then you tend to run out of coenzyme Q10, which is the electron shuttle. So the battery gets further impaired, and then it becomes oxidatively damaged. It doesn't have enough reduced ascorbate. It doesn't have enough of the reducing substances to protect it. And the net result is harm to the cell and to the person.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an intimate relationship between glutathione production and utilization and ascorbate, what we call vitamin C, but it's actually not a vitamin.
So what I heard you say right there is, in addition to all the energetic functions that the mitochondria participate in, such as beta oxidation of stored fats and so forth, the mitochondria are really critical for detoxification. And I think a lot of people, when they think of detox, they think of like the liver and the kidneys and the GI tract. But if I understood you correctly, the mitochondria are really involved in detox as well?
That's exactly right. It is true that probably 2/3 or more of our detoxification happens in the liver, and maybe 15% in the kidneys, and a certain smaller percentage in the spleen. But frankly, every muscle, every cell of the body does some detoxification. And in the best of cases, the spleen and the liver take the toxins out quickly before they get to the other cells. But if they get to the other cells, then the other cells have to detoxify them. And wherever it happens in the body, it happens in the mitochondria. So you're quite right. The liver is the primary organ of detoxification. We want to strengthen that. But there are additional organs of detoxification, including the kidneys, the spleen, the skin itself. And we want to strengthen all of those because there's often quite a bit of an assault on many people, even at the same time that they're trying to compensate and be healthy.
Gosh, I love where this call is going, Dr. Jaffe. Now, you hit on something that I think a lot of people are kind of scratching their heads at, and you said that ascorbate's not a vitamin, and I think people think ascorbic acid and vitamin C. So let's dive into that.
In the 1930s, Albert Szent-Györgyi isolated this reducing substance that we now call vitamin C from Hungarian paprika. And there's a whole story that I'll tell at another time about why that was the case. But he's the man who first isolated this reducing substance, and it was named vitamin C. But we now know that unlike vitamins, this does not activate catalysts it's used directly. It's a substrate. It's used up in the course of detoxifying and energizing and protecting the other antioxidants in the body. So we can think of ascorbate, which is the correct name, as what it is, the mother protective molecule for all other protective molecules in the body. So vitamin C ascorbate, and I prefer to call it ascorbate, protects the membrane. It picks up the extra electron from the vitamin E and selenomethionine in the membrane. It helps shuttle it to glutathione, and from there to FAD or NAD to intermediaries that bring it into the battery, the mitochondria. And the very same electron that makes the ATP in the mitochondria was one that could have become a free radical in the membrane if you didn't have enough vitamin E and selenomethionine to catch it and give it to ascorbate. If you want to regenerate lipoic acid or taurine or glutathione, since we were talking about glutathione, Alton Meister and other researchers showed many years ago that the best way to raise glutathione in the cell, to increase glutathione synthetase, to improve recovery and recycling of glutathione, that the best way to raise glutathione in the cell is to give ascorbate. And it seems counterintuitive because we know that ascorbate and glutathione relate to each other in this shuttling of energy and electrons. But what's more interesting is that the best way to raise glutathione is to have a healthy reduction, oxidation, or redox potential. The redox potential is set by ascorbate and no other molecule, only ascorbate. There's a lot of misunderstanding about that, but the answer is ascorbate on both quizzes and in life. And so the ascorbate is a substrate. It protects and sacrifices itself so that other antioxidants can be protected. And on the other hand, it can get reversibly or irreversibly oxidized. If it's reversible, that's good. If it's irreversibly oxidized, then it's wasted. And so the amount of glutathione that you generate is proportional to having enough ascorbate. And while Bob Cathcart developed the concept of bowel tolerance, we've developed the concept of the C cleanse. It's the next generation after bowel tolerance. You very quickly saturate the body with ascorbates, with mineral ascorbate. So you have calcium, magnesium, potassium, and zinc minerals along with the ascorbate, and you take as much as you need to saturate the system so that you flush toxins and fluid out, and that's called the C cleanse. And when you take in the amount of ascorbate you need to protect from oxidative stress, you also are maximizing the glutathione inside the cells.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So we do need the sulfur foods. It's not like you can take 2 B6 to equal a B12. It's not like you can use one essential nutrient to replace the other. But if you want to know from the literature what is the best way to raise glutathione in the cell, it's to have enough ascorbate, and then make sure that along with that, you have enough of the sulfur-sourced foods and supplements, and you have enough minerals like magnesium and potassium to buffer the cell.
Mm-hmm. Great. So if we want to keep our bodies out of crisis mode, we're doing the alkaline diets and stress reduction and minimizing toxin exposure the best we can, what would the doses be in your recommendation? Or maybe it's personalized is what I think you're going to say on vitamin C. What would you say for most people that, where do people seem to benefit, in terms of dosing?
Well, what we find is that really healthy people, these people are asymptomatic by a colonial medical index. They're really healthy. Mm-hmm. They will have a C cleanse in less than 4 grams, and that's not very much. Then you have, and that's not many people. Mm-hmm. Then you have about 5% of the population, which is pretty healthy, and they will calibrate between 4 and 10 grams, which is still not very much. Then you have 80% of the population, and they will need between 10 and 120 grams to cleanse. That's 10,000 milligrams to 120,000 milligrams. And then you have about 1 in 20 people that will need even more to cleanse. And these are people who have very serious oxidative stress overload. Mm-hmm. So there's no molecule in biology that we need in larger amounts. And there's also no molecule in biology that we have more trouble predicting how much individuals need. Mm-hmm. So my answer to your question, how much ascorbate does a person need? It's a straightforward, important question. My answer to the question, how much ascorbate does a person need, is based on knowing how much oxidative stress they're under. And since that's really hard to measure, we developed the C-Cleanse as a self-assessment tool. This is something people can do at home, generally within a couple of hours, and then they can calculate how much ascorbate they themselves need. So you need 3/4 of the amount to cause the cleanse spread through the day. So say for sake of discussion, it took 20 grams to do the cleanse. 3/4 of that would be 15 grams. And you would take 15 grams spread through the day, not all at once, but 15 grams spread through the day. 3/4 of the amount to induce the cleanse is what we recommend as the daily intake need to meet the oxidative stress the individual's under.
Great information. So, and I inferred from the cleanse that's some bowel issues. You want to talk about that?
Well, the point here is that when you very quickly take in as much ascorbate as the body needs, then the body pumps toxins and fluids into the rectum. Remember, embryologically, the rectum comes from the kidney, not from the colon. So the body uses this capacity to pump toxins and fluids into the rectum, and then you have a flush or a whoosh. It's like you gave yourself an enema from within. It is such a distinctive endpoint that whether you have normal bowel habits, have a history of diarrhea or constipation, this will be unique in your experience. Once you've had it, you know what it is. And before that, you're not so sure because you haven't had the experience. But what people find is that when you very quickly pump the extra fluids and toxins out of the body, then you don't get the discomfort with the creeping up on the amount of ascorbate you needed through the old bowel tolerance technique. Many people felt uncomfortable, gurgles, spasms, what have you, and that's a disincentive. What we found was that you can saturate the body with the ascorbates, and of course it has to be L-ascorbate, the natural form, not the synthetic form, has to be fully buffered and fully reduced, of course. But you can saturate the body fairly quickly by taking in graded amounts of ascorbate every 15 minutes. And we have a write-up online on the C-Cleanse, and we recommend that folks take a look at that if they wish. But the essence is that every 15 minutes you take an appropriate amount of ascorbate until you feel full, and then you start slowing down so that you can have a cleanse, removing extra fluid and toxins, and generally feeling much better to go on and about your day, and then having personally calculated how much ascorbate you need for the coming week. And we recommend doing this on a weekly basis until you're in a stable mode, and then continuing with that amount of ascorbate until you find that once repair deficits have been corrected, your stools get bulkier and looser, and then you re-cleanse because you'll need less. So the interesting thing is that many people are in repair deficit. They need more ascorbate than they've been taking in. When they start doing the C-Cleanse, they find out how much, and then very often over the first few weeks or months, the amount they need increases because the body is cranking up to get over its repair deficit. And then you go into a stable high repair mode for a while, and then you overcome the repair deficit and you need less. And that's indicated by the stools getting bulkier and looser, but also indicating when you repeat the C-Cleanse that now you don't need as much as you did before because you're more efficient. You have less oxidative stress. You have less wear and tear repair that your body is burdened by. And now you can get back to being really healthy for life.
Information. And I would also like to say that if folks haven't done this vitamin C flush before, I would recommend they do not do this while they're traveling.
That's right. Do not do this at work. The
Right.
first time you do this, don't do this unless you know where the commode is.
Yeah.
So yes, this is something we generally recommend that folks do on a day off or on a weekend to start. Once you get the hang of it, it won't take very long, and you'll probably be grateful. At least many people tell us they are. But yes, this is not something to be started on an airplane.
That's great. All right. Well, I'll share that story with you another time. Okay. But let's transition a little bit to biomarkers. You know, I know I've learned from Jeff Bland that GGT, gamma glutamyl transpeptidase, is a really good marker for glutathione. But I know you're a huge fan of other things like homocysteine and C-reactive protein. So do you want to hit on predictive biomarkers and kind of what they are and what they mean?
Okay.
Well, yes, let's talk about this briefly, and then maybe on another time we can come back and talk about the whole subject of predictive biomarkers as opposed to just biomarkers, and then high sensitivity predictive biomarkers. So be happy to, but the headline is that when you look at something like gamma glutamyl transpeptidase, GGT, what you're really looking at is repair deficit or irritation and inflammation in the biliary tree. And that correlates closely enough that for government work, it's kind of a marker. But it doesn't qualify as a predictive biomarker because the definition of a predictive biomarker is that the test has to have been used on every geographic, socioeconomic, and ethnic group and have data on 10-year survival, predicting 10-year outcome based on the value of the test today. So there are not many tests that qualify as predictive biomarkers, even though there are many, many biomarker tests. So transglutaminase is one, or GGT is one of the biomarker tests. But I can tell you, as both an internist and a laboratory physician, very often the what I will call the quick and dirty understanding is very incomplete, and we can really get into the interrelationships and interdependences of markers, biomarkers, then predictive biomarkers, and then most importantly, the high sensitivity ones, the ones that allow you to guide therapy based on those values because of the precision with which the tests are done, as well as the knowledge of how they look at the long term. Mm-hmm. So if we look at homocysteine, which does qualify as both a biomarker and a predictive biomarker, we have a sulfur-containing amino acid that in the body is in a relationship, a ratio with methionine. So we look at absolute amounts, like how much homocysteine is there, when we really should be looking at the homocysteine to methionine ratio. But that's another subject for another time. Mm-hmm. So homocysteine is a biomarker, and it's predictive because Kilmer-McCulley, starting in the 1960s, showed that aggressive heart disease and then risks of cancer and then all-cause mortality, morbidity risks can be predicted based on your homocysteine level. Now, homocysteine turns out to be hard to measure from the laboratory point of view. So many people say that you have to do a very fresh specimen and process it within 30 minutes. And we've actually shown recently and reported at laboratory meetings that homocysteine begins to leak out of cells, leak out of red cells, almost as soon as you draw the blood. And that we have introduced a new cell preservative anticoagulant that prevents the leakage of homocysteine from the red cells. And so now you can get a more accurate homocysteine, and you have 2 to 3 days rather than 5 to 10 minutes to analyze the specimen to get the accurate homocysteine. So we want biomarkers, but we want the ones that are predictive, and then more particularly the high sensitivity biomarkers, because they can be done with enough precision to guide lifestyle therapy.
Perfect. So what I heard you say right there is don't get your homocysteine levels tested by a traditional commercial lab because it may not be valid due to the sample specimen instability.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Many laboratories will not even process a specimen for homocysteine if it's over 30 minutes old. Now, that's a big limitation clinically. That means you can't draw it in the office and send it to the lab to measure, and most offices aren't equipped to measure homocysteine. So homocysteine has been underutilized because it's an easy test to do badly. And we, among others, are taking a look at these predictive biomarkers, bringing them up to high sensitivity standards, and reintroducing them for our colleagues to use.
Great information there, Dr. Jaffe. Now, I'll put all this information in these links at highintensityhealth.com/drjaffe. So if you're listening right now while you're walking your dog or driving your car or exercising, don't worry, when you get back home, it's going to be at highintensityhealth.com/drjaffe. But what I would love to do now, Dr. Jaffe, is kind of connect this full circle. We've been talking about toxins, metallothionein, glutathione production, and we know that and then now homocysteine, we just talked about the predictive biomarkers and so forth. And let's kind of weave in methylation, because methylation is so involved in homocysteine regulation and also the production of glutathione. So do you want to talk about that?
Well, methylation is in vogue. It's where the action is today. It turns out that if you want to make something more soluble, you put more methyl groups on it. And if you want to make it less soluble, you take methyl groups off it. So the short story about methylation is it's about making things and moving them around and putting them in place. Pretty important. Really pretty important. So if you have healthy methylation, then you're able to repair your structural proteins, your collagen, your elastin, your basement membranes. If you have a healthy environment like that, then wear and tear is constantly being renewed. No part of your body is more than 10 years old, and that's part of your bones. Your large blood vessels turn over every 7 years. Most of you is new from a few weeks or months ago. So this notion of we wear out is an illusion. It's an illusion because we lose the ability to repair because our immune systems become so preoccupied with defense work that has to be handled first. So we really want to bring it full cycle. We really want to have foods that we can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden. We now know how to do that. Then we want to make sure that for our individuality, for the amount of oxidative stress and lifestyle stress and perceptual stress that we're under, that we're taking in enough protective antioxidants and buffering minerals. Ascorbate is our friend here, and the C-cleanse is particularly our friend because it's a self-assessment. It's something we do as individuals and consumers in order to find out at home how much antioxidant stress we're under, how much antioxidant protection we need. And then one of the bonuses is that the best way to build the glutathione that we need, the best way to detoxify from most of these environmental toxins, is to have enough ascorbate. And as a further bonus, when you have enough ascorbate, if your battery, if your mitochondria is, say, uncoupled, that's the technical term, if it's got a short circuit in it, ascorbate is the only molecule in nature that can rehabilitate the mitochondria. So the fourth cytochrome, the cytochrome D, has a 0.5 millivolt gap, for those of you who are technical, and ascorbate is the only molecule in nature that can bridge that and restore the vitality and the health to the mitochondria. So for all these reasons, we want to have enough sulfur in the diet in ways that we can make use of to protect us from toxins, and we want to have enough ascorbate as the mother protective molecule to deal with the oxidative stress of the 21st century. And that's where the C-cleanse, as well as the other things we've been talking about, come in. So thanks for the chance to bring this information to you and to your community. And I am grateful for the opportunity to help clarify this. As I said in the beginning, I came as a skeptic, but I believe the opportunity to survive the 21st century is in our hands. And if we don't just default, that we can live well, long, and at affordable costs. But on the other hand, if we consign ourselves to the sick care system, then the human and financial costs will bury us all.
Dr. Jaffe, this has been amazing. You're just loaded with great information. So I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to meet with us on a Sunday while you're on vacation nonetheless. But there's just one final question I would love to ask you. And that's a question that we ask every guest on the show. So if there was one lifestyle or health tip that you could share with Barack Obama or a congressman in an elevator ride over the course of, say, 30 or 60 seconds, what would that health or lifestyle tip be and why?
Living in the Washington, D.C. area, I don't get to see the president, but I do get to have the elevator speech. And what I say is the following. We can choose to live well at low cost. And if any of us have loved ones, if any of us have parents or children, if any of us are concerned about the epidemic of neurodevelopmental delays and early senility, if any of us are concerned about the epidemics of metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases, if any of us are concerned about preserving $8 trillion worth of human assets every year so that in a decade we can save 10 million lives and add $80 trillion to the balance sheet of America, so that Medicare and Social Security, among others, can be viable. I urge them to vote early and often in favor of health, to score prevention at the Office of Management and Budget and the Congressional Budget Office, so that prevention can finally have a seat at the table. And with that, I put a vitamin C in their hand and wish them well.
Beautifully said. I can tell you have practiced that before. So, Dr. Jaffe, again, thank you so much for joining us. I've learned so much from you, and I would love for our listeners to be able to reach out and connect with you. So, you have a few different websites. What are the best resources online where folks can learn more about your work and connect with you?
Thank you. Thank you. In addition to the links that you'll provide, www.elizaact.com, is the website for the immune tolerance and intolerance test. Perq, PERQUE.com, is where you can get information about progressive supplements as well as health appraisal questionnaires to find out what supplements you might need as an individual. Healthstudiescollegium.org. You have to spell it all out. Health Studies, plural, and Collegium, Collegium, healthstudiescollegium.org has our academic work. So if you want to know the policy implications or the strategic implications, healthstudiescollegium.org, and I'm one of the founding fellows. And then if you're a consumer of lab tests interested in predictive biomarkers, it's Better Lab Tests Now. That's BetterLabTestsNow.com, betterlabtest.com. And that's a consumer direct access to lab tests and interpretation site where predictive biomarkers, among others, can be made available to proactive consumers.
Perfect.
And if that isn't enough, drrusselljaffe.com has information about me.
Well, Dr. Jaffe, thanks again for being here. I'm absolutely honored to be chatting with you. Now, I hope you enjoy the rest of your vacation and your Sunday. And for folks listening that want to learn more about this and your work and connect with you and your different laboratory and nutrition companies, all those notes will be posted at highintensityhealth.com/drjaffe. So I hope you all have a great day, and thank you for tuning in.
The same, Mike. Keep on doing what you're doing. Thanks for the opportunity to share the information.
Thank you.